2020, I just got this package in the mail, and it was this book and this photograph from a woman named Doreen Inglis. Doreen's an artist. Port Dalhousie is like kind of part of St. Catharines. It's right on Lake Ontario. It's not really like a novel voice. It's more like there is like a spoken voice where you can like hear, it's like your friend is telling you a story. I was like, wow, these stories, they're so fun. And there's the illustrations in here are like also like wildly fun. I mean, there's just, reminds me of like American graffiti, but like set in St. Catharines. Like it's like Canadian graffiti, like Happy Days and Wonder Years, like that kind of like classic like Americana stuff, but it takes place in Canada. Holy shit, this is like amazing, and no one's ever heard of this or done anything with it. Like, I want to find out more about this. Coach House I know as very important press. It's like downtown. It's like on, it's like near BP Nickel Lane. Yeah, it's right here. Weird street. It's like right behind, well, BP Nickel is a very famous, well, he's a Canadian poet. Oh. Was a poet. Okay. Yeah, very important poet. And so Coach House is here. It's like Bloor and, it's just like inside Bloor and Spadina. And it's like down this like laneway. And so, yeah, if you go to Street View, this is the laneway, okay? And look, if you go in here, look, see the sign right there? Mm-hmm. So this is, so, I mean, it's called Coach House because it's like, these are actual old coach houses.
Oh, that's so cool.
Okay, down this laneway. And they've been in these buildings since like the late 60s, like when they started. Mm-hmm. Okay, and they're still there. And so they have these like little poetry events, like it's kind of like a Sanka set kind of thing. And like, so I went there in like August, and it was this beautiful little event. There was probably like 12 people there, and a couple of people read some poetry. They had like a bit of wine, and like some of the editorial staff were there. What happened was all of the rights all went back to the artists. Okay, so then I got Nadia Layham's email in June, his widow. And then I spoke with Nadia on the phone, which was like insane. Like, we talked for like 2 hours. I could like barely get a word in. Really? Yes.
She had a lot to say about him.
She had so much to say. She was like bursting at the seams to like...
Were you talking mostly about him?
So a little while later, I got this package in the mail from Nadia. Okay, and there's like so much cool stuff in here, I like can't even begin. So she like sent me this letter. So the Port Dalhousie stories. So Dennis performed and read the Port Dalhousie stories in bars for many years before it was published.
Oh, wow.
Okay, the TV is the poem. Yeah, so this like funny little book, and look, it's all these like drawings of, they're like kind of drawn poems. I was like, interesting. They're like fishing books, but it's like TV fishing books. And look, it's all like handwritten and like full of drawings. That's Dennis. Yeah, this is Dennis. Yeah.
That's hilarious.
And so, but then she also gave me the tapes, the talking book. Yes.
Remember, I was only 15 at the time, so I probably saw things a lot different then than I do now. But I'm going to tell you anyway. It's about Port Dalhousie and some things that happened there. Strange things that happened some time ago. Things that you've probably never heard of.
There's like all these like quite important authors that they're producing these talking books. So there's this catalog. So this is like the main book. This was produced for an exhibition called The Language of Visual Poetry. It's like a retrospective exhibition of his work, and this is like 2014 that gives like a bit of like an overview of his like life and work. And so there's like a certain amount of like chronological, you know, it talks about like his early days like as a musician, and then it goes into like his like artistic, getting into like art, like in Peterborough in the 70s and like through the 80s. in Ottawa and Paris, all through the 90s, like until his death in 1998. That's Nadia. This is Nadia and Dennis in Peterborough in this building where they live, which is an old schoolhouse. And look, and she's even written down like key chapters and like page number references. This book you can see is published by YYZ Books, which is another artist-run center here in Toronto in 401 Richmond. Okay, so this is something. And then look, there's a card for a painted play, which was like a new form of art that Dennis created. And this is at Theatre Passe Muraille, which is like down the street on Ryerson. And then the other thing that was in here that's really cool is this little thing, which I'm trying not to get it folded up, which I realized, you can see there's like a newspaper article here, but then also this is actually a cassette tape sleeve. So this wasn't like compiled and like edited and published in a book until 87, but the writing of them begins like as early as 1970, okay? This was recorded live in 1977 at the Lion Hotel in Port Dalhousie. There's this article right here that's photocopied, and the title is Rebroadcast of Offensive Program Out. So he said the number of complaints received after the original broadcast was not large, quote, but they were obviously sincere. So I'm like, so this is funny, right? So, and then like this, so that, like, I mean, there's like a kind of like a conflict there, or like a kind of a controversy, or like there, like it's like kind of, there's like a bit of trouble there in a way. So I'm like, that like intrigues me even more, right? So that kind of like draws me into this. These paintings about the October crisis, that was a really big historical moment that had a huge like effect on a lot of people, and particularly Dennis TOURBIN. Like he really he seemed to like really be affected by that and continued thinking about that for a very, very long time, because that event happened like in the early 70s, I think 1970. Okay, and he was making paintings about it like over 20 years later. He made all these paintings about this stuff, which were scheduled to be exhibited in the National Gallery in like 1995, which was right around the time of the major referendum on Quebec separatism. And so this exhibition being like right around that moment, they pulled the exhibition. Again, this is a very interesting, you know, kind of complicated, kind of messy situation. And so then there's like John Boyle, who's the artist, the illustrator of the book. And then so John Boyle is kind of, that's like a kind of lead into this whole like London regionalism, which was like basically a movement in Canadian art in the 50s, 60s, 70s. So Catherine Jenkins, she's a poet and like a professor at TMU. I was able to get in touch with her, and I met up with her for coffee, and I brought all this stuff to show her. And so she lived in Peterborough. She was like a kid in the 70s, and Dennis was like this older, kind of like a mentor to her. He was the person that kind of encouraged her to be a poet, and that she could be a poet. You know, as an artist, he did all this like artwork and like poetry and, you know, hybrid theater, performance, music, all this kind of, there's like his art, but he also did some really other very important things, which he was like an organizer of art galleries. So, but another really important thing that he was involved in as an organizer was Canadian Artist Representation, which is known as CARFAC now, but it was started as CARO. And this board is like kind of like of this list. So I started organizing these connections into communities, institutions, and individuals. So in Dennis, there's kind of like a strange like symmetry with myself in a way, and so I kind of feel like very uniquely like able to see him and like perceive him, and like it feels like it's part of me, like it was meant for me, I was meant for it, like it has there's some very strong kind of connection to it. And now I'm like proposing to like, I want to like now really go out and do the work.